Hi, everybody. Great to be here. What a wonderful panels there have been this morning. Great information. So yes, I'm an attorney with the New York Legal Assistance Group. And the unit, the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program. I think I'll just sort of go over here so I can see. We do specialize in Medicaid and Medicare and advocate for better policies and help a lot of people with MLTC and other issues. We have a website, nyhealthaccess.org, which I hope you look at. And today we're going to start off talking about the CDPAP changes. You've heard a lot about that this morning, and some other changes going on in New York State Medicaid. Okay, so we did hear, I just want to give a little more detail to what you heard this morning about what was enacted in the budget last month. So we know about 200,000 New Yorkers on Medicaid have CDPAP services. That's consumer-directed personal assistance. Now, most of them, I think about more than half of them, are in MLTC plans, and that's how they get their CDPAP services. But others are don't have Medicare, and they're in a different type of plan called a mainstream Medicaid managed care plan. Now, these are estimated figures, okay? we're just being rough. And then many of them get it from their local Department of Social Services, right? Albany, Chemung County, DSS. If you're not in a plan, you can get services directly from your county. And many of those people are in waivers, like the OPWDD waiver or the traumatic brain injury waiver. But they get CDPAP services through their counties. So the changes affect all of those people, a lot of people. And as you heard, there are about 650 fiscal intermediaries, and those are like the agencies, those are the home care agencies that pay about 300,000 home care workers in the CDPAP program. And there's a great preference I know when we counsel our clients, what kind of home care do you want? Do you want a traditional aid, or do you want someone through the CDPAP program? It's very popular because people can really have more autonomy in the CDPAP program. They can hire, an elderly woman can hire an adult daughter who otherwise would have to get a job because she needs income to pay her bills. But now taking care of mom can be her job. She can get paid for it. And the same thing with a parent for an adult child who has a disability. So, and not to mention that there's, as you've heard today, a big home care workforce shortage. It's national, and it's especially bad in New York State. So a lot of people use CDPAP out of pure necessity. There's just simply no aids in the traditional agencies. And in fact, their MLTC plans tell them, you better use CDPAP because we don't have aids for you, okay? So what was enacted? As you heard, the state is shifting and going to hire one fiscal intermediary for the whole state, replacing 600 or 650 fiscal intermediaries. So many of those will go out of business. Some of them also operate a traditional home care agency, and those can continue, but it's really going to be an issue for each agency. And somehow between now and next April 1st, as some of the comments were made today, in a very short time, the state thinks it's going to wave a magic wand and make 650 agencies disappear, and all consumers, all personal assistants will need to sign up with this new single FI. All the MLTC plans will all have to contract with the new FI. This is a very, very ambitious overhaul of this program. And I personally and professionally think it's totally unrealistic, even apart from whether it's wise, okay? Which I don't think it is. It's not realistic to do this in less than a year. And what's going to happen? People are going to get hurt, because when things aren't realistic, they don't happen correctly. It was spoken before that, that at least the 11 independent living centers will survive that operate fiscal intermediaries. But I'm a little worried about that, because as a lawyer, we actually read the words of the statute, and the statute says that the single FI shall contract with an independent living center. Now, you don't have to be a lawyer to know what the word "an" means, right? It doesn't say some or all. It says "an." So will that mean just one out of the 11 wonderful independent living centers that have been running fiscal intermediary programs for decades in our state will survive? Or was that a typo in very hastily drafted legislation, and they really meant to say, oh, whoops, yeah, we meant 11, we don't know how to write that word. So I don't know. And then they can contract with a few more in each rate-setting region, and we don't know what that means. They didn't define it. Are there 4 regions? Are there 8 regions? At any rate, we're talking about a handful, not, so as it was said before, this is going from, 650 to maybe 10, maybe 5, we don't know. So a lot has to happen, as I said before, in this very short time, and we're very concerned about disruptions in care for consumers, and that aides will not want to go and work for the new FI, and they'll go work at McDonald's instead. Already, these jobs were not well paid, and you add more bureaucracy to them, more hassles in getting paid, they'll say, okay, sorry, I'm not doing it. So I think it's going to aggravate the workforce shortage. Another thing in the budget is that it authorized the State Department of Health to adopt regulations that could require training for personal assistants in CDPAP. Now, that was during the budget negotiations. This was one of the, in some of the myths that were circulated on the internet, were that, it's appalling that CDPAP workers aren't trained. Well, yeah, that's the whole idea. It's called consumer-directed assistance. And since the 80s, when this program launched in a demonstration program, very successful in New York City, and then it was adopted by the state in legislation almost 30 years ago in 1995, one of the hallmarks of this program is that the consumer or their designated representative, perhaps who is in charge of the care for a person with dementia or for a child, they do the training, they handle it. And you know what? That's the smartest way to do it. That preserves autonomy. And don't forget, in CDPAP, the aides are allowed to do tasks that normally are not allowed for home care aides. They're allowed to suction a tracheostomy. They're allowed to administer oxygen. They can do tube feeding, saving the state a lot of money, because normally those tasks, if they're not done by family, have to be done by a nurse. And do you think a nurse gets paid a little bit more than an aide? Yeah, but they don't get paid enough either in Medicaid, we know that. but they do get paid more than an aide. So they'd cost the MLTC plans, they'd cost the state a lot more money. So, but in a traditional aide training program, are they learning how to do IVs and tube feeding? No, because aides can't do it. So I don't know what kind of training they think they're going to come up with. But it's going to be yet more bureaucracy that's going to turn more aides off of being in the CDPAP program, again, aggravating the workforce shortage. So, but there were a few wins. The governor initially in her budget proposed some very bad cuts in CDPAP. They were going to cut wages, just downstate. I guess they don't like us New York people in New York City and Westchester and Long Island by eliminating wage parity. They were going to say CDPAP was only available to people who can direct their own aid and not to, so it would have disqualified anyone with Alzheimer's disease or a traumatic brain injury who depends on a loved one to direct their care from CDPAP. Those did not pass. And do you think there might have been a lawsuit about that, saying people with dementia can't get this service? Does that sound a little discriminatory to you? Yes. Okay. So that didn't go. But, you know, a lot, obviously, they came up with a very big cut. So why was the governor so hell-bent on really changing this program? Well, in our view at NYLAG and a lot of consumer advocates, CDPAP is being scapegoated for other issues in the home care industry. And you know, the fact is that yes, CDPAP has grown and over the last 5 years or so, but a lot of it is because of the workforce shortage. As I said, some plans just tell the consumer, their members, if you don't use CDPAP, we can't help you. This is what you have to do to get care. The state charged some fraud. There were some, really ridiculous videos going around about fraud. And I'm not going to go through this, but when you see your slides, there's really just, in any Medicaid program, there are some bad apples, and there is the tiniest amount of fraud found in investigations, and relative to a lot of other Medicaid providers and MLTC plans, it really has not been a problem to merit this sort of vicious attacks that were sustained on it. And New York should be proud of, in 2016, they expanded the law to say an adult child could be the caregiver for her parent as a CDPAP aide. So, okay, that caused an expansion of CDPAP. And same thing, a parent could be the personal assistant for an adult disabled child. That did expand the attractiveness of the program, because now people could, again, instead of going out and getting a job and leaving mom with somebody else who's paid to take care of her, the person who knows her the best and best able to take care of her could get paid to take care of her. So it expanded it. New York should be proud of that instead of saying, this was terrible, we have to cut it back. Now, at the same time, the MLTC population doubled from about 150,000 to about 300,000. Now, why isn't the state looking at why did that population double so much? Why is the state only looking at the growth in CDPAP? And we think that some of that growth is because of perverse incentives that are baked in to the MLTC model. And you heard Senator Rivera talk about this very passionately earlier today. So the whole model of MLTC, they get paid a flat rate per member per month, called capitation. So the more members that they attract, the more they get paid. Now, do they want all those members to be people who are quadriplegic and need 24-hour care? No. They want people who don't need a lot of services, right? Because that's how they make money. So in the whole MLT system, the plans have a lot of contractors, right? They have adult daycare centers. They have social adult daycare. They have regular home care agencies. They have CDPAP. They all make deals and say, you bring us 100 members, we'll give you a good rate. All right, and that goes on in all providers. Yes, it goes on with CDPAP and MLTC, but it also goes on with every other kind of provider. So the state has created a system where they're incentivizing this growth to attract low-need people who they're eligible. The state has an independent assessor. They are eligible, and they need the services, but they create the system and they're shocked, people are coming in. But don't blame CDPAP. If you want to deal with the system, deal with the system. But this is why we think the state is overpaying for MLTC, because most people they're attracting don't need a lot of services, but yet the state's paying them a lot of money to cover the very few people who need a lot of care. So we think we're supporting Senator Rivera's Managed Care Home Care Savings and Reinvestment Act that he talked about this morning, and that would overhaul this and eliminate the middleman. And you can read more about that. We also think we're urging the state, there's a bill now, and it just came out in the Assembly too, that promotes transparency and accountability in MLTC. You know, this is a $15 to $20 billion program, and there's very little data out there. The state gets a lot of data from plans, but they don't share it. No, they don't. It is not made public. And so this bill would say, make some of this data public. So what happens to these high-need people? Are they getting care, or are they being denied care and being put into nursing homes? Show us. They have it. They know how many people are being disenrolled from a plan because they're placed in a nursing home. They know that. Why don't they share it? And then consumers could compare plans and say, oh, look, I want this plan. They're keeping more high-need people at home. They're giving more people 24-hour care and putting fewer people in a nursing home. And the state could be looking at those things for accountability. Also, the state right now, it's sort of hard to believe, in a time of the workforce shortage, it's an experience that consumers have. They get approved for care, and then care doesn't start for a few weeks because there's no aids. Is the state tracking that? Are plans required to report 236 cases, unstaffed, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks? No, nothing. Don't ask, don't tell, right? Well, the federal government has suggested evidence-based measures to track access like that. They've been suggesting that for years. This bill just says, New York, take the suggestions of CMS and track these access measures. This slide shows one of the things that we're asking, that the bill asks for, but I'm not going to take the time to go through it because we're short on time, but you'll be able to look at it later. So let's look at some other changes coming up. What is a good thing? Last year, the law approved Medicaid for undocumented seniors, okay? Immigrants who were not eligible for full Medicaid before, as of January 1st this year, are eligible for full Medicaid. And that means nursing home care, but they do have some restrictions. They can't join an MLTC plan for home care. The way they get home care is through a mainstream managed care plan. So those usually are not for seniors. So it's a little mind-bending for those of us who work with the elderly, because we're not usually enrolling our clients in those plans, but these people are not eligible for Medicare because of their immigration status. And that makes them eligible for these mainstream plans. And that's how they'll get their home care, okay? So it's important for those of you who work with seniors, and so many of whom who might be immigrants, because before this population was only eligible for emergency Medicaid, which is, the car accident, the hospital treats them, and that's it. But no physical therapy, no home care, right? So it was very limited. So there's a slide here, I'm not gonna go through more nuts and bolts about how they apply for Medicaid and get care, and links to more information. We're in a post-COVID era. Hopefully, we're not catching COVID today. We've all heard it's a little bit around. So we're in the unwinding of what the feds call the public health emergency. And this is a big thing, because during the 3 years of COVID, states got a lot of extra Medicaid dollars. And there were strings on that Medicaid dollars. There were some billions of dollars. The big string was they were not allowed to cut anyone off Medicaid. Didn't matter if that person who wasn't working before started working, now they have a nice income, forget it. They couldn't cut them off no matter what, okay? So, but then that's over, and last year, in the spring, it's about a year ago, that the state started doing renewals, Medicaid renewals of everyone on Medicaid. These renewals had not been done for 3 years. Everyone just stayed on. That was it. Well, all those renewals started, and if someone wasn't eligible in that renewal, they could be cut off, all right? And their spend down could go up or whatever. So we're still in the midst. People who are older or people who are disabled, that to keep in mind. Now, update, even since I finished these slides a few days ago, that date has been updated. So these easements now go through June 30th, 2025. All right, another 6 months. And now these are significant for our population. I think the biggest one for people who work with older people is when they do a Medicaid renewal, if that renewal is anytime before June 30th, 2025, their assets aren't looked at. Now, we know there is an asset test for older people and people with disabilities, right? You have to have under, it's like 30,000 or something now in 2024. Well, in those renewals, and I'll give you an example, they can't cut you off if your assets are above the limits. And, but if you're first applying for Medicaid, you have to have assets under the limit. And if you're going into a nursing home and applying for nursing home Medicaid, that's, your assets have to be under the limit. But for renewals, they don't have to be. So it helps to just look at an example. So of someone who's on Medicaid and gets an inheritance, okay, $100,000. Now, normally, you're nervous about doing the renewal with $100,000 in the bank, right? Good elder, right, Lou? You wouldn't tell your client to do the renewal with $100,000 sitting in the bank. But is he eligible for non-Magi Medicaid? That's Medicaid now? If that renewal is done anytime before June 30th of next year? Yes. Because of the waiver of the asset test. He cannot be cut off even with that money in the bank. So that, look, he still needs to see an elder law attorney. He still needs to do planning because that party will be over next year. The asset test will be back, but at least he has a little reprieve. There's some other protections. You know, we get clients whose Medicaid was cut off, and the notice says, it's April 1st, your Medicaid will be cut off April 10th. You have 60 days to request the hearing. But you only have 10 days to request a hearing and get aid continuing. And this is also true with MLTC. MLTC says, we're going to reduce your hours. You have 60 days to request a hearing, but only 10 days to request it and keep your services going. That's aid continuing. Here's another easement and flexibility in the unwind. As long as you request that hearing before the 60-day time limit, you get aid continuing. It's a special flexibility. Again, now, I'm not sure when this, I think it will be through June 30th, but I'm not sure. Okay, so, oh boy. I'm gonna skip some of these, but you can look at them, some of these other issues with renewals. I do wanna say we have seen problems. People send in their renewal and their Medicaid is still cut off. And they've been disenrolled from their MLTC plan, okay? If you see it, this slide has some tips if that happens. Like request a hearing, you can contact our office. These are glitches, they're not supposed to happen, but you think of, there's shortage of staff also in the local Medicaid agencies. HRA is so short-staffed. So when we bring these cases to them in New York City, it's like, my client just got kicked out of her MLTC plan, her 24-hour care ended. What happened? Oh yeah, sorry, whoops. It's short staffing, no one got to it in the pile of renewals, and whoops, sorry. You know, these are life and death mistakes, but you know, look out for those, and we do have an email address you can send them to, even in other counties, and we can try to hook you up with help. Okay, people are always asking, what about the 30-month look back? And what about the 3 ADL restrictions? So these are things that were enacted back in 2020. Bad things, the MRT2, Medicaid Redesign Team II, that we all know for nursing home care, there's a 5-year look back, and they passed a law that would make a 2.5-year look back for home care, assisted living program, MLTC. This has been put on ice because of COVID, all right? They haven't been able to do it. But once it starts, now the state has told us this will not start earlier than sometime in 2025. They haven't put it in writing. They don't know the exact date. But I can tell you that now, if you apply, let's say at least, I think probably not till April. Why? Because there's a lot, they're not allowed to do it yet because of the COVID rules. And even when they are allowed, it's a big lift of administration. So that's going to take a year. And when it does apply, it will only apply to new applicants. Your clients on an MLTC or an assisted living program will not be forced to go through the look back. The 3 ADL requirement, which we think is terrible, will also apply only to new applicants. This could go into effect even earlier. This can go into effect later this year. We don't know exactly when, but for new people seeking to enroll in an MLTC plan or to get home care through their local agency, they'll be required to show that they need help with 3 ADLs, 3 activities of daily living. That's up from the current 1, okay? And that help has to be what they call limited assistance, which is shown on this slide. which is more than supervision. It's more than cueing. It's actual physical assistance. So the only exception to that is that people with dementia can get in the door if they need supervision or cueing with 2 ADLs. Now, we think this discriminates based on disability, and it has a lot of problems, which I don't have time to go into, but they're on the slides. Just a few things on the independent assessor. That's been in effect now for almost 2 years. The complaint numbers here, you should keep that on your bulletin board. Send where to complain. This is the State Department of Health, and all these slides are available, right? There's a URL link. A victory we had as advocates and working with other trade groups and things. It was supposed to be expanded in January. So far, NIA, New York Independent Assessor, has only conducted assessments for new people coming into the home care system. They were supposed to expand it to all renewals done by MLTC plans, or every time an MLTC member needed an increase in services and asked that for the plan, it was supposed to be NIA's nurse, not the plan's nurse, taking over that assessment. That we got halted through advocacy, so those have been postponed indefinitely. Here's a letter from Medicaid Matters, a coalition NILAG is in, telling the state, you can't do this. There's just no capacity in NIA. This is a disaster. Now, we weren't the only voice. Plans pushed back at it on it too. There was a lot of pushback. That was a victory. Change that just happened last month. Let me just tell you about this. When NIA started, who's familiar with the immediate need process? When you have an immediate need for home care, you can apply to your local district and bypass MLTC initially, okay? So at first they said, file your immediate need application with the local district, and they will make a 3-way call with you and the consumer and set up the appointments with NIA. Do not call NIA directly. Change, all right? This is really off the presses, just last month. State directive says, okay, you can call NIA first and then apply for immediate need, and we'll catch up and use those NIA assessments. So that, because everybody's backed up, so they just made an alternative way to apply for immediate need. The state released some data that were pretty troubling. 16% of all people applying to enroll in MLTC were found ineligible to enroll in MLTC by NIA. It's 33,000 people. Now, these slides say we are disturbed by that, and we think that they are not really assessing people properly. And you know, one of the reasons that we think that they're making mistakes are they only ask the person, do you have help, and did you ambulate or bathe in the last 3 days? Oh yeah, I did. My daughter comes on Sundays, but so I had to do it myself. Okay, you're independent. Because they only look at a 3-day window. So, counseling tip, if you're preparing people for a NIA assessment, if they really need help with that assessment, make sure they get that help in the 3 days before, or else they'll be considered independent, and they will fail and be denied MLTC. Okay, there's some other things here, but we're done. Okay.
Valerie, I do have one, Valerie. I do have one question. Am I on? We good? Okay. You heard Assemblyman McDonald talk about Stan, who was here last year. Yeah. And Stan was here while his fair hearing was pending because he went through the process. MLTC awarded 4 hours. He went through an internal appeal, got an extra hour. On fair hearing, got 16 hours after fair hearing. Right. How, and that's not, in our estimation, uncommon. For those that advocate through the fair hearing process, how many get those denials of hours overturned?
You know, we don't have data on that, and that's one thing that data transparency bill would do, is require them to show how many people win. But we know, at least with reductions in hours, like 95% win. On the increases, I don't have the data.
Yeah. So anecdotally, we see this, it gets overturned. A lot of times it's a phone call once they know you're going to go to fair hearing because they don't want a negative decision.
Right.
But Stan has been here, we'll see a video of Stan in a little bit, advocating and having the ability, using the resources on the NILAG website, which we rely on. So for those that aren't familiar with the New York Legal Assistance Group and what Valerie's group puts out on their website, it is the touchstone for elder law attorneys across New York State. So thank you for
Thanks, Lou.
all of that.
Okay, thank you.